When I reach 1000 subscribers I will be giving away a $25 Amazon gift card away. To enter, like, subscribe and leave a comment below. Posted BU/Gveldson. Evil stepfather gets what he deserves. TLDR at the bottom. I made a comment on another post, got way more upvotes and comments than expected, and you/Alex28-3 and you/Drake1 suggested I tell a more in-depth version of the story here. When I was 15, my mom started dating a man she met on a dating website. I didn't like him the first time I met him, and 2 months later he moved into the house. About 3 weeks after he moved in, he took my skateboards, self-built halfpipe, ramps, BMX bike, ice hockey gear, and many other things to the dump one day while I was at school. He said he did this because he didn't want all of my crap cluttering up his garage. Maybe 2 months later he punched me in the stomach for the first time because I got up from the dinner table without asking to be excused. From there it escalated into full-fledged beatdowns for the smallest perceived slight to his authority. One day he decided to take my extensive Pokemon card collection, even more extensive comic book collection, my Game Boy and PS2 with all the assorted games, and my fantasy and sci-fi book collection, and got rid of it all because 15-year-old boys should be playing football and baseball, not being a ref ***OT nerd playing with Pokemon cards, and reading comics and books. I would like to add that he was a middle school teacher, and then his off-time refereed and umpired local middle and high school sports games. My mom never intervened, and in fact, acquiesced when he demanded that she stop giving me lunch money because the little shit will just spend it on comics and other gay shit. One day, I took maybe $3 and change out of his change jar so that I can buy a slice of pizza and some fruit punch during lunch at school because I was tired of being hungry. My twin sister was always a bit of an asshole and frequently blackmailed me into doing her chores from a young age. I was fed up and refused to do something, so she told him what I had done. This man actually called the police and pressed a larceny charge against me, and once the police had left beat me senseless. At that point I ran away. When the cops found me and returned me to my home, I found out that I've been trying to talk my mom into sending me away to military school or something of that nature. I ran away again, and between having run away several times and the larceny charge ended up turning 16 in juvenile detention. I spent the next couple years miserable and afraid, frequently contemplating suicide. Once I left home, I didn't speak to my mom for several years. We eventually reconciled, and by that point they had married. I was a lot bigger than I had been as a young teenager, and had gotten into weightlifting. So he no longer acted like he was going to punch me to make me flinch, much less actually hit me, and we basically avoided each other for the most part. My mother found out that she had stage 4 cancer and no longer wanted to waste any of the time she had left with him, so she had a lawyer draft up a separation agreement whereby he would receive a set amount of money upon separation and would have 45 days to retrieve his belongings from the house. He had spent his entire inheritance in 6 months and then had to sell his mother's house that he grew up in order to settle his debts shortly before they started dating. And my mother bought the house back from the bank before they married. She allowed him to keep the house and he moved back into his mother's house. My mother passed away about 9 months after their separation, and despite the agreement, have been allowing him to come and get his stuff piecemeal. I put an immediate end to that. He was past the deadline to remove his personal effects and they were now legally mine to dispose of as I saw fit. I sold his baseball card collection, around $14k, and his autographed sports memorabilia, roughly $11k, and also sold all of his woodworking equipment, along with several finished pieces of furniture that he had made, $6,500 I think. I kept his mother's engagement ring, platinum band, 3 diamonds roughly 2 carats, wedding band, his coin collection. I also collect coins and some tools and other odds and ends. Now comes the real fun. Around a month ago I finally saw him at the grocery store. As he was leaving I approached him. I told him I had sold his collections as he was pushing his cart out towards his car. He reacted exactly as I expected. He took a swing at me multiple times. I already had my phone ready to dial 911. Several of these punches missed, and the ones that did connect didn't have much effect because he's nowhere near as strong as he was 20 years ago in his 40s, and I no longer a skinny little 15-year-old. He continued to try to punch me as I spoke to the 911 operator and was actively ramming his grocery cart into my new Toyota as the police officers pulled into the parking lot. He was arrested for assault, communicating threats, and destruction of property. As a result, he lost his job and pension at the local middle school, and because he had never learned how to save money while married to my somewhat wealthy mother, ended up having to sell his mother's house because he hired an expensive lawyer thinking he could somehow beat the charges. My nephew, who was on the football team, made it well known to his friends that he not only had just been arrested and convicted of assault as well as other charges, but that he had also beat me as a child, caused several parents to call for him to resign from refereeing and umpiring for local sports games. My niece and my girlfriend's much younger sister are enrolled at the middle school where he worked and say that he was not only universally disliked, but when he came up to the school to get his belongings, he made a big scene and ended up hysterically crying as he was leaving. At least that's what they've heard from the kids who were attending summer school at the time. His son, who he was equally abusive towards as a child, refused to take him in or help him out, so the abusive stepfather ended up having to take a job as a cashier at Walmart so that he could afford the rent on his crappy little trailer in an absolutely awful neighborhood. Even though that Walmart is not the closest Walmart to my house, that is now the only place where I go grocery shopping or to purchase anything that I need. I purposely stand in line longer than I need to, just so that he can be the one who has the pleasure of ringing up my purchases. The first time I went through his line, he attempted to ring up multiple items more than one time to overcharge me, and when I called him on it, he said that I was mistaken. I asked for a manager, and the manager believed him, that it was an accident, but he learned that he can't get away with that. The second time, I made sure to be as nice as possible and had to ask for a manager because he was overwhelmingly rude. The people in line behind me backed me up, and he got in some trouble for that. Every time I go there and step into line, I see him die a little bit inside, and it gives me such satisfaction. Sometimes I'll say that I'm paying with exact change, and as I'm about to hand him the money, I'll say, "Oh, I didn't realize I had rare coin from his collection in my pocket. I guess I'll use my credit card." I just sold his expensive ratcheting wrench set, and so on Monday, when he works again, I'm going to go buy my daughter one of their better above ground pools, and as he's ringing it out, tell him I know that my daughter is just going to love this pool. It's not like I would have ever used those expensive ratcheting wrenches anyway. TLDR, asshole stepfather got rid of all of my prized possessions as a child and beat the crap out of me regularly. I ended up getting all of his prized possessions and selling most of them, and when I told him, he tried to assault me in public, which resulted in criminal charges, losing his job and his house. Now I get to see him all the time and rub his nose in it. Edit for clarity. Posted BU/into_the_Jaya. I took the power back from the man who ruined my life. Disclaimer. First of all, some aspects of this story are potentially disturbing, so if you are sensitive, read at your own discretion. Sorry if my story is all over the place. I don't have the best organizational skills in writing. The years aren't exact, they are just a spacer. Also, the revenge isn't necessarily interesting and or funny, but I believe it still works. The beginning. From the beginning, Hank had been involved in my life. A family friend and a member of my parents' church. He worked in the nursery and watched over me. He always helped out with children's programs in the church and even watched over me outside of the church. Since he was a friend of my father's, it didn't seem weird when he got me gifts, took me places, or gave me a little spending money. Also, he had a son my older brother's age, Jim, that my brother was friends with. Year 1, when I was in the 6th grade, I was around 10. My brother would hang out with Jim every Sunday after church, and I wanted to come too because I wanted to be like my brother. Obviously, they didn't want me around, so while they were ignoring me, I developed a friendship with Hank. We would play video games together in his basement for hours until my brother and I had to leave. I don't know when exactly it happened, but one day Hank was standing behind me watching me play when he ran his hands over my body. I was confused and didn't know what to do. but it didn't matter because just as quickly as it started it was done. It was stupid, but I continued to come over and occasionally he would do it again. He started threatening me that if I told anyone he would know and he would kill me, and that if I wasn't allowed to stop coming so my parents wouldn't wonder why. Although it didn't happen often, it was picking up, but he was also taking me more places. I didn't like being with him, and I did at the same time. Year 2, around 7th grade, things picked up. Whenever I came over he would touch me, and he would do it for longer each time. Even when he took me out, and when we were at church, he would take me into bathrooms. Around this time, even though I still wasn't sure what I was feeling, I started to resist his actions, and consequently, he started the physical abuse. He would hit me with whatever was around, books, computer keyboards, etc., and punch and kick me. Once, he stabbed me in the back with a syringe. Around this time he started taking me to a pool. At the pool, he would touch me in the water, and had me touch him in the shower and use my mouth. Year 2.5, the summer after my 7th grade year, my church went on a camping trip to a lake. My parents didn't really do that stuff, but Hank and Jim invited my brother and I to come with them. Since my brother was always with Jim, Hank had almost 24-hour access to me. During this trip, Hank was on me whenever he had the chance. Year 3, around my 8th grade year, is when the verbal/psychological abuse started. Hank decided to take the route of constantly demeaning, degrading, and insulting me every chance he got. On top of his words, he started making me wear a leash, crawl around on all fours, and eat dog food, all while naked. He even had a collar made that said "Hank's little bitch." Now this whole time I had been dealing with mental illnesses that were only worsened by what he was doing. That year I started really cutting, and I tried killing myself multiple times, which landed me in the psychiatric hospital twice. After coming out of the hospital for overdosing, Hank took me to a movie and explained to me that he was going to stop. He said he really cared for me and didn't want me to end up dead, and he really did. I was free, but my mind was still conflicted, and I was still scared of him, so I didn't tell anyone. I slowly did my best to go to church less and less. The aftermath, that wasn't the end of my hospital trips. Even without his abuse I was mentally unstable. I kept cutting and attempting for years. It was bringing down my education and my relationships with family and friends. Finally, when I was in 10th grade and in the hospital, I let it slip to a therapist that I had been abused, and she helped me tell my parents. Slowly, I was able to tell my parents a little of what happened and eventually, who did it. The revenge. As soon I said it was Hank, it started. First I talked to a police officer, although I could barely say anything. Then I was brought to an establishment designed for kids to talk about what has happened to them. I talked to a woman and told her all about the abuse. Well, the sexual abuse. I was still scared, and I couldn't bring myself to mention the physical or others. The case against Hank started, and they started looking for the evidence. One day, I let it slip to my parents that other abuse happened, causing me to go back, and this time, I told them everything. They got their evidence and arrested Hank, but that didn't mean it was over. The worst of it was still coming. It was one thing to talk to one person who was trained to talk to me, but now I would have to testify at a trial. I had to relive my experiences sitting across from Hank, and then I had to be interrogated by his lawyer. Luckily, I was stone-faced. I was able to talk to his lawyer without breaking down. I don't really remember exactly what was said, but Hank's lawyer wasn't the best, and some of my responses to his questions made the people in the court laugh a little. After that was the real thing, a trial with 12 strangers sitting there listening to my pain. During the pre-trial, I was kind of quiet and scared, but I went into that courtroom the day of the trial and confidently told everyone what the bastard had done. The result: guilty on 1 count, child abuse 3rd degree, 2 counts, child abuse 2nd degree, 2 counts, criminal sexual conduct, 2nd degree, person under 13, defendant 17 or older, 1 count, criminal sexual conduct, 3rd degree, person under 13, defendant 17 or older, 1 count, criminal sexual conduct, 1st degree, person under 13, defendant 17 or older, sentence 25, 40 years. Edit. The real revenge though, is not letting him hold me down for the rest of my life. Posted by u/ungrateful Sky Raisin Pie. My first post, after reading many of them, so hopefully doing it right. This is a story relayed to me by my best friend's dad, who we'll call Don, for when he used to work as a camp cook up in Northern Ontario, Canada. Also not sure if this is petty or pro-revenge status. Don was working as a cook at a dam construction site in the middle of nowhere just outside a small northern Canadian town. The workers mostly stayed and lived in the camp for a few weeks at a time and where breakfast, lunch, and dinner was provided. So you can imagine cooking for a bunch of hungry workers was an all-day event, and Don would start things like pies for dinner, dessert in the morning or right after lunch. After being taken out of the oven, as he would put the pies by the windowsill to cool, and then he'd do other things around the kitchen, or go to supply warehouse, walk-in cooler, etc. 1 month in late spring early summer, he would find his pies going missing, sometimes a dozen or so at a time. He would do sleuthing and asking around, but no one would admit to it or no one ever saw anything. That's when he hatched a plan. For anyone ever had spent any time in the Canadian spring and summer in the wilderness, you would have experienced the dreaded horsefly. These things were basically the great white sharks of flies, and can literally take a bite out of a person and cause them to bleed. They were huge compared to the housefly and were as abundant as sand on a beach. I think you know where this is going. Don set up a fly trap and caught at least a gallon of these things and proceeded to make Sky Raisin Pie. He used all the same ingredients as any fruit pie, but substituted in the juicy plump flies instead. He made enough for 2 pies and left it by the window, and sure enough, they went missing. He never did know exactly who stole and ate the pies, but he had a good guess as 2 of the young camp workers was on the toilet most of the afternoon and missed dinner altogether. No one got seriously hurt or anything, but pies never went missing after that. When I reach 1,000 subscribers, I will be giving away a $25 Amazon gift card away. To enter, like, subscribe and leave a comment below.